Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesdays, the official football podcast of Bruce Sports. I'm Ian DeMars, alongside always Ryan Solomon. And Ryan, can you believe we're just around a month away now from training camp starting in the NFL?
It's crazy how fast that time of the year sneaks up on you because you get into this summer dead zone where there's really only baseball coming up on TV, and then all of a sudden in August you have preseason games. So it's very quick, only a couple month turnaround there.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Some of the camps start around the middle of July. Most of them, with including, or some of them start early for the rookies. A good amount of teams actually do rookies and veterans reporting all together. So it's a very exciting time in the NFL. Reason why I did mention rookies is because unfortunately we do have to start off with some major news that broke out recently regarding a what would have been a rookie in the NFL, and that has to do with Jonah Williams, offensive lineman for the Cincinnati Bengals. Was a first-round pick this year, and reports have recently been put out there that he's expected to actually miss the upcoming NFL season due to a shoulder surgery. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals last year got off to a great start. Then they had some issues last year pertaining health. Defense had some issues as well. How big of an impact is this going to have for the Bengals?
I think this is going to be a big time impact because we looked at what that team's major issue has been for a long time now, ever since they got kind of decimated in free agency on their offensive line. And it's been that part of the offense has been the line. Andy Dalton hasn't been able to get the time that he needs. The running game hasn't developed like they wanted to. And Jonah Williams was supposed to be a big part of getting that back on track. And I think a lot of people that are Bengals fans were encouraged by that pick. And now seeing that he's going to miss the entirety of this season, and this is Zach Taylor's first season, is going to kind of set the tone for whether a lot of these pieces that they have on offense are going to be staying around or if they're going to be looking elsewhere for productivity in the future, such as Andy Dalton. Is going to be decided. So this is big for the Bengals, and if they can't find a way to get around this and have another season that's a 4-12 season, 5-11, 6-10, anything that misses the playoffs, really, they're going to be looking to get a new quarterback. So I think for all of the players on the team, this is very important that they find a way to come together and overcome this injury.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate trend. You look at the last couple of years, they've had first round player rookies that had to miss time. Look at John Ross, a guy who we really don't know what he's going to be in the NFL. We know he's fast as hell, but how's that going to determine his play on the field? He had an okay career at Washington, but I think the speed was really what made him a first round, in fact, a top 10 pick. It's just an unfortunate setback for this team. This is a big year for Cincinnati. You have a new head coach. The defense was horrendous last year. Andy Dalton is at that point where they might look to move on from him. I mean, they did draft Ryan Finley out of NC State in the draft. So they have a lot of things to look at this year. And if they don't find some sort of success with this team's going to look a lot more different next year. I do think that not just coaching wise, we could, like as we had said, Andy Dalton might not be on that team next year. You look at a guy like AJ Green could possibly be traded. There's a lot of pieces on this team that could make this team very well, and they have good young talent. This is just a really tough blow for a team. I think that was really depending on Jonah Williams to fill a big need for this team this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And we keep bringing up the name Andy Dalton. Obviously, this is a big season for him. It's going to determine his future with the franchise. If he doesn't get the protection that he needs up front, it's going to be a rough one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of just looking ahead. I know we kind of talked about this a little bit last week when we did our preview. I know I think we both had them somewhat, not the top two, I would say, but maybe towards the bottom. Do you think this makes them the worst team in that division?
I would say yes, unless Lamar Jackson struggles mightily with the Ravens, unless the Browns have some sort of collapse with all of the players they brought in not gelling together. I don't see the Bengals being able to overtake the Steelers and most likely not able to overtake the other two teams also. So I think in terms of predictions right now, you'd have to have them in the basement of the AFC North.
Yeah, this definitely doesn't help them. I know I'm still rolling with my picks last week. I still think that for some reason it could be Pittsburgh, but this definitely is a major setback for the Cincinnati Bengals. Remember, they got off to a hot start last year. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to do something like that throughout the whole season. But this is just, like I said, we're only a month away, so obviously a lot could still happen. They could still maybe go after someone, or maybe someone develops into a good start for them. That's something that we're a month away from seeing, and it'll be interesting to see how this does pan out for the Bengals. But let's shift gears now. Let's look at a player where we really don't know what his status is for next year, and that's Tyreek Hill. He is set to meet with the NFL this week to discuss the recordings of him possibly beating his son and his, I think it's girlfriend. I don't think they're married. So regarding this, let's look at Tyreek Hill first. How worried should he be?
I think Tyreek Hill should be reasonably worried because we've seen this trend in the NFL now where they're trying to take a harder stance on issues of domestic violence. So we saw what happened with Ray Rice. He was basically shunned from the league after the video surfaced of him punching his wife. And a similar thing happened with Kareem Hunt, where he's not out of the league, but the Chiefs got rid of him immediately after they found out that there was video surfacing of his, alleged abuse. And this is a big issue. This is domestic violence they're talking about. They don't want to leave any stone unturned. They don't want to just turn their eye to this because they've gained a reputation before that of being a league that doesn't care a whole lot about the violent acts that these players commit or the illegal acts that players commit, and they're trying to shed that reputation. So if I were Tyreek Hill, I'd be worried about being made an example of with the Chiefs.
And this is, I guess we can say it's a little bit different than the other ones because in some of these cases, you look at Ray Rice, you look at Kareem Hunt. They had video evidence regarding this, which obviously was a huge factor in them either getting suspended and or released by their teams. You look at past issues with other players. Look at a guy like Greg Hardy, who's had multiple issues. Guy that was out of the league, got back in the league, and now is in the MMA. With Tyreek Hill, it's a unique scenario because all we know is that there are recordings, that there's also notes, details regarding this case, but we really don't know what the actual video evidence is. And if there is something that supports the case, then obviously Tyreek Hill could be in a lot of trouble, not just in the NFL, but outside the NFL. Until we see some more proof, it's going to be hard to determine what kind of punishment he's actually going to get. So he does need to be worried because we've seen in these cases, you look at some of these cases, how they started beforehand, you can make a case that was maybe somewhat similar to what Hill's going through right now. And then suddenly out of nowhere, you see TMZ showing a video. So he does need to worry. And if he suddenly hears his news pop up with TMZ, I think he's definitely should be very worried.
And what also is worrisome is when there is this sort of murky, maybe there's evidence, maybe there's not evidence. I don't think teams anymore or the league are going to want to err on the side of lack of evidence. They're going to want to levy some sort of punishment if there's anything even resembling a possible recording, a possible video, or something like that. Because we've seen that they want to take a hard stance on domestic violence, and I think that's going to continue. So even if there is somewhat of a lack of evidence, if there's any shred out there, or if there's any reason to believe that something else could be put forth, I think that they're going to try to have a strong punishment come through for Tyreek Hill. And we've seen with Kareem Hunt that the Chiefs aren't afraid to get rid of star players.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I said, just look at Kareem Hunt. That's definitely the most recent example that you could look at. Let's focus on the Chiefs right now. How worried should they be regarding this case?
I think they should be worried too because Tyreek Hill is the spark plug that ignites that entire offense. You think of it being Patrick Mahomes, but how many times last year did Patrick Mahomes throw an out route to Tyreek Hill who ended up taking it the distance 60 yards for a touchdown? He was really a big play threat in that offense. And if he's not going to be there for any extended amount of time, or if they're going to have to come up with a decision on whether they can keep him or not due to publicity or bad publicity or due to punishments from the league, they should definitely be concerned about this because he's a large part of their offense that might be gone this year if the situation unfolds a certain way.
Yeah, I definitely am agreeing with you. They need to be worried because they've had issues with players on their teams before. So it's going to get to that point where we might be worried about what kind of players that team recruits in general. And I mean, I'm not exactly sure if the NFL would be able to punish the team in any sort of way for what kind of players they bring in, but they definitely need to review the situation going forward because, like I said, the fact that there have been multiple issues with big name players on their team over the last year definitely says something about what kind of players that they look at when they try bringing in players for that team.
Yeah, that's also true. I think really everyone in this situation should be concerned because there's this weird halting right now of information being released and of action being taken. And whenever there's that sort of quiet, there's some sort of deliberation that's happening. And this meeting with the league should be a little bit more telling on what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, and like I said, that meeting does take place on Wednesday. We should know a little bit more by then, but knowing how the NFL looks into certain cases, we probably won't get a full answer regarding what's going to happen for, I'd probably say at least sometime in the training camp. Would you agree?
I would probably agree with that, yes.
Okay. Let's switch gears now. So we didn't get anything posted late last week regarding the question week. We did get something up recently, though, and it's regarding the sophomore quarterbacks that are in the AFC East. So it's a unique scenario where there's going to be potentially three starting quarterbacks in that division, all second-year guys, all top 10 picks. You can go on Facebook right now. There are two choices on Facebook. Twitter has all three choices. So I'm going to ask you this, Ryan. Of the three quarterbacks in the AFC East, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen, which one do you think has the most to prove in their sophomore year?
I think each of them has about the same amount that they need to prove. They both had somewhat similar rookie seasons, with some having a little bit more shining moments than others. But I think the one with the greatest expectations has to be Sam Darnold. And that's because he's actually in a situation that is kind of on the up and up. You have Adam Gase, who some people recognize as some sort of offensive guru. You have Le'Veon Bell now that's in there in that offense, so he should help a young quarterback. You have some developing players on that roster as well that are pretty solid. And we're looking for the Jets to actually have somewhat of a decent year. And if they fall flat on their face and end up with 3, 4, 5 wins, that's going to be a disappointment. Whereas these other teams, the Dolphins, we're still questioning whether they're tanking or not. There's not a whole lot of pressure on Josh Rosen to succeed if he even wins that starting quarterback job. And then Josh Allen, there's not necessarily a pressure yet with the Buffalo Bills, even though they're trying to retool their roster and they also have some good players. They're not really looking to win this season, maybe in the next 3 seasons or something like that. The Jets fans, though, are hungry for some results, and they've had to wait for years now for any sort of quarterback to produce for that team. There was expectations that Geno Smith could be the guy. He turned out to not be the case. Christian Hackenberg was drafted there. He obviously failed miserably. So there's a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold to actually show that he can take a step forward after his rookie season, which is actually somewhat productive. So I think he's the one that has the most pressure on him.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough question because you could, as you said, you could easily make a case that any one of these quarterbacks could or has the most to prove. Sam Darnold's probably playing in the biggest stage of all three in New York. You look at Josh Allen. There was people were saying that he had a great arm coming out of college, but last year it seemed like we saw a lot more with his legs than his arm. Then you look at Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen, I think, was just put in a bad situation last year, and as a result, got put in a worse situation this offseason to the point where he gets traded. So all three of these quarterbacks have something to prove, but I think the one that I'm gonna go with, I'm actually the opposite here. I'm actually leaning towards more both the Joshes in this case, but I think it has to be Josh Rosen. The reason why this guy was a top 10 was the 10th pick 10th pick, and he performed the worst out of these three quarterbacks last year. I mean, yeah, he played on a bad team. Yeah, his team didn't have the best set of weapons, but he still didn't perform that well. Josh Allen, we saw him have some great performances. Sam Darnold had a good start to the year. He's had some turnover issues, but Josh Rosen has most to prove, and he's going to a situation where the amount of weapons improves a little bit, but there's still some question marks on that team. There are the thoughts of them possibly tanking, and he has to prove himself to even win the starting job, right? They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick this offseason, and there were reports that he was doing better than Rosen in training camp, or not training camp, but mini camps. Obviously, I think an issue with that has to do with Rosen still kind of learning the playbook and everything. But I think that Rosen is the one that has to improve the most because he's on a new team in a new scenario where he has to kind of prove himself in order to show people why he was expected to be one of the best quarterbacks in the draft.
That's one way to look at it, but I think the fact that the expectations have been so dampered already, I mean, the team that drafted him traded him away 1 year after. They clearly didn't like what they saw. I think at that point, any sort of success that he has is a step in the right direction. I don't think there's enormous expectations on him. So maybe from a standpoint of who looked the worst last year and is most in need of a reboot type season, I would say that Josh Rosen is probably your guy. In terms of who has the greatest expectations, though, and who might have the most pressure now, I think it's clearly Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and I think we're both kind of in agreement that we thought that Josh Allen, although still needs to prove stuff, did enough last year to make fans in Buffalo not worry as much as maybe the fans in New York and the fans in Miami have to worry about.
Yeah, not worrying as much, but there's still a lot of development that needs to be had there before he can be regarded as the for sure franchise quarterback of the future for the Bills.
I definitely agree with you on that one. So that is our question of the week. As we always do, make sure that you check out our question either on Facebook or Twitter. Twitter has all three options. Facebook only has the options of Sam Darnold or Josh Allen. And early poll results, actually, there's a tie regarding the picks on both Facebook and Twitter. It's 50-50 on Facebook for Allen and Darnold. And then on Twitter, it's 50-50 with just Rosen and Allen. So that'll be up all week. We'll give you the results on next week's episode. But Ryan, this last week we started looking at previewing the upcoming NFL season. We looked at the AFC last week. We picked our division winners, made a surprise pick, and we made a bit bold predictions in each division. So this week we're looking at the NFC. So we're going to break down who we think is going to win the division, the surprises, and we're also going to make some bold predictions again. So Ryan, I'll have you go first. So let's start with the NFC East, the NFC North. So last year, that division, the Bears, they kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, they got Khalil Mack in a big trade last year, and that definitely helped out the defense. But Mitchell Trubisky took a big step forward on offense, and Tariq Cohen played well enough for that team where they got to the playoffs and won that division. You look at the Vikings, they signed Kirk Cousins. Things were looking great for that team. And then what ends up happening, they struggle to get to the playoff, or they struggle to get to the playoffs again. And as a result, they don't get there after having somewhat of a good start to the season. Green Bay, on the other hand, had a good start to the season. There were some injuries. Aaron Rodgers hurt that knee in the first game, didn't really look like himself the full season. And they, again, didn't make the playoffs and didn't have a good year. The Lions, they're in a place where they have some good talent, but they just don't know, I think, how to put it all together, and that's why they struggled last year. So, Ryan, who do you have winning that division this year?
So I think it's worth talking about the Packers for a little bit because an article came out recently that LaFleur, the new head coach, is going to be taking over a lot more of the play calling for Aaron Rodgers and not allowing him to do as much work at the line of scrimmage, which Aaron Rodgers had basically had free reign to do under Mike McCarthy, which Aaron Rodgers took some exception to. This is going to be an interesting year for the Packers because Aaron Rodgers is a guy who's thrived on people doubting his ability and thinking that he couldn't succeed in the NFL. So early on, when people thought that he wasn't going to live up to Brett Favre's legacy, he proved everybody wrong and won a Super Bowl and became the best quarterback in the NFL. Now, for the past 4 or 5 years, he's pretty much been living off of that reputation, and people have just accepted that he's the best in the NFL. Well, after hearing about this dispute with him and Mike McCarthy, now people are starting to question whether Aaron Rodgers is really able to live up to his billing as best quarterback in the NFL. Now, with a new offensive scheme, a new head coach, I think he is going to be looking to prove himself again and get back to his position as best quarterback in the NFL, which I think you're going to see a new, different, more focused Aaron Rodgers trying to prove his haters wrong once again. And my prediction is that the Packers are going to take this division solely on the fact that Aaron Rodgers is going to come out with more fire than we've seen him have this last half decade.
All right. So how do you want to do? Do you want us to go back and forth, or do you want each of us to do all three of our selections and then the other?
Let's go back and forth.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, I honestly think this is a toss-up this year. I think honestly, if you had if you had like a die or something, just flip it, and I think any one of these teams could honestly win it this year. I think the Lions did enough in the off season with free agency and the draft to show that they can compete this year, especially with second-year coach Matt Patricia. I think the Vikings are in a position to bounce back. I think that the Bears are still good enough, even though they did trade away Jordan Howard, which a lot of people still think is a questionable move. And then obviously the Packers, with getting a new head coach, it's really a toss-up in my opinion. But I'm going to go with Green Bay as well. I think that having Aaron Rodgers, a lot of people, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, Devontae Adams, who has kind of grown into being one of the best receivers in the NFL as well. Aaron Jones looks like he's going to be the feature back this year. I think he's in line to take a big step forward this year. He's lost some weight this season. I think he's going to be ready to go. That defense is starting to look a lot better with the moves that they also made in free agency as well as the draft as well. So I think that they're in position to make a big step. I think they can leap Chicago. I think they're going to win this division. But I do think that this division could come down to probably the last week of the season for any four of these teams, honestly.
And to make this perfectly clear, I'm not usually somebody to pick the Packers because the Packers consistently let me down. So this has to tell you something about my belief that Aaron Rodgers is going to be angry. Let's go to our bold predictions and our surprises, and both of them, for me, center around the Chicago Bears. So my surprise, well, I guess I'll go bold prediction first. My bold prediction is that Mitch Trubisky ends the season on the bench. So even though he did fairly well last year compared to his rookie season where he was basically abysmal, I don't think that he's going to be the best quarterback for the Bears going forward because a lot of his issues and deficiencies were masked last year by how good the defense was and how good the running game was. Now they don't even have Jordan Howard anymore, so they're going to rely solely on Tariq Cohen. And I think it would be very difficult for that defense to be as good as it was last season because a lot of teams came in unprepared for what that defense was bringing to the table. So I think that Mitch Trubisky is going to be asked to do more in his role this year as quarterback, and I don't think he's going to manage it well. So I'm going to say that somewhere near week 12, I think he's going to end up getting benched when they're in the thick of a playoff race, and I think Chase Daniel is going to take over starting role for the Bears. And then my surprise is that the Bears are going to make the playoffs even without Trubisky starting.
That's a really big surprise. And
big surprises and bold predictions, Ian.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting that, especially when you said that Trubisky was going to get benched. Chase Daniel is a very liable veteran backup quarterback. So, and we have seen him start for the Bears in the past. So it definitely could possibly happen. And if Trubisky does have setbacks, yeah, definitely, and they're in the playoff position, you do have to think that is a possibility. So I do like what you went with.
I mean, picture this. The Bears maybe lose 2 games in a row. One's a divisional game where Mitch Trubisky throws for 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in the thick of the playoff race. It's highly conceivable that he could get benched for a player that is a little bit more reliable, a little bit more steady. And this team and this quarterback remind me a lot of what the Jacksonville Jaguars were last year and 2 years ago, where they sort of came out of nowhere relying on the defense, and Blake Bortles was able to just coast and do well enough to get that team to the AFC Championship game. Then the next year you saw he struggled more and the team sort of fell apart. I could see that same thing happening with the Bears, but them not letting it get that far by taking out Trubisky.
Yeah. Uh, the Bears, like I said, they were a surprise last year, and I think if they did drop this year, I wouldn't necessarily say it is a surprise, but some of those moves are bold and would be surprising. But for mine, I'm actually not going to go with the Bears for either one of them. So first, I will do my surprise. I think my surprise, which you can make a case might not be a surprise. I think the Lions are going to make the playoffs this year. I think.
No, that's a surprise. That is
Okay.
definitely a surprise.
Okay, and the reason why I say that is like I said, I like a lot of the stuff that they did this offseason. I like them going after Trey Flowers. I like them getting Damian. Yeah, they did get Danny Amendola. They got Jesse James. They drafted T.J. Hawkinson. I think that some of these moves that they made are in line for them to find some better success this year. Kerryon Johnson's going to come back healthy and be the workhorse back for them that they've been looking for quite some time. I think that this team, I don't think they win. They're not going to win the division, but I think the wild card spots are really up for grabs this year in the NFC, and I think that they're going to be able to take one of those spots because of all the acquisitions they've done this offseason. And my bold prediction is that the Minnesota Vikings will finish last in that division. I think the reason is we've never really seen Kirk Cousins have a lot of success. And I know I've said this before. I said that they needed a quarterback to get to the Super Bowl, and Kirk Cousins could have been that guy. But there are some question marks regarding that team. Is he going to be able to bounce back? He's got a lot of pressure playing under that big contract. And that team was very inconsistent throughout last year. There were times where they played really well at home, but then they get shut out or they lose to the winless Buffalo Bills. There were times where they had really big games against, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles earlier in the year, but then they couldn't show up on the road again the next time against the New England Patriots. They were just very inconsistent, and I think part of that has to do with Kirk Cousins. I think he's a very good quarterback in the NFL. I'm just not sure he's going to be able to take a franchise deep into the playoffs or even make a substantial attempt at the playoffs. I think this year they're going to take last of the division, and they're going to have some real question marks to think about going into next year.
One thing that you said absolutely rings true to me, and that's that there's so many teams that could possibly make a wild card spot in the NFC this season. There's a lot of teams that are coming back from players with serious injuries. If you look at the San Francisco 49ers, a lot of teams with completely retooled rosters like the Seattle Seahawks. And it seems like most teams in the NFC, except for a few, are going to be in the thick of things, and it's unclear how it's going to turn out. So let's go to another division and see what we can find. Which one do you want to go to next?
Let's go to the South.
To the South?
Yeah.
All right. You want to go first with your division winner?
Yeah, I'll go first on this one. So looking at that division just off last year, it was a very exciting division to start off this season. The Panthers, the Saints, they got off the great starts. The Falcons, they were good, but they fell into inconsistencies and a lot of injuries. Tampa, they just kind of fell apart after the Fitz magic that happened earlier in the year, and then inconsistency between him and Jameis Winston. You look at what ended up happening. The Saints won last year. They got nearly to the Super Bowl. Obviously, we know why they didn't get to the Super Bowl, but that's something for another story. Looking at this division this year, I do think that it's going to be another tight race, but I'm not going to go the trendy pick. And the trendy pick is the Saints just because of how close they were to the Super Bowl last year. I'm going to go Carolina. And the reason why I'm choosing Carolina is because I think Cam Newton is going to bounce back. We saw how well they played last year. First 8 games, they were 6-2. They were in a great position to make the playoffs, if not as a division winner, as a wild card. And then you could start seeing that there were some issues with Cam Newton. You could start seeing that the shoulder was becoming an issue, and as a result, he ended up getting shut down late in the year. And they still were able to play decently well even without him. So you put him healthy in the lineup, that team is good enough to get to the playoffs and win some games. I mean, we saw him get to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, so it's not out of the window of him not getting there. And they have Christian McCaffrey. They got DJ Moore last year as well. A very exciting young team. They always have a very solid defense as well. Look out for this team this year. I think that they're going to turn a lot of heads and they're going to make a statement and rise back up to the top of the NFC South.
So I went with the so-called trendy pick because I believe they have the best roster. I believe they have the best quarterback in this division. I think they have the best running back in this division, even though you could make a case it's Christian McCaffrey. I think the Saints are the best team here, and I think they're out for revenge after they basically got robbed last year from going to the Super Bowl. And we talked about our Super Bowl picks a little bit earlier in the year, and I picked the Saints to actually win the Super Bowl over the Patriots. So I'm going to stick with this team winning the division. We know that these teams, especially the Panthers and the Falcons, have the ability to rise up at any given year with their rosters and be extremely competitive. We've seen each of these teams make it to the Super Bowl in the last 5 years between the Falcons and the Panthers. So I could foresee one of those teams knocking off the Saints, but I think that roster is just too strong right now.
Yeah, and that is definitely a good option to go with. Drew Brees is getting up there, which kind of puts some question marks regarding the team. There still are some questions about Michael Thomas did do a lot for them last year. Is he going to be able to continue that production going forward? And the defense struggled at the beginning of the year, but then they found their step. So definitely, I think is the trendy pick. So definitely a good choice to go with here.
I wouldn't say we have questions about Drew Brees yet. He hasn't fallen off the cliff yet. If we see this season that he starts to struggle, then we can talk about having questions. But for now, he's a very, very reliable quarterback, one of the top ones in the league still.
Okay. Let's look at our bold predictions and our surprises now. So my surprise, although I'm not sure if you would even say this is a surprise, I don't think Jameis Winston is going to finish out the year at quarterback for that team. I think that he's gonna have flashes this year, but I think it's going to get to that point. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs no matter what happens this year. But there's going to be a game this year where he makes a lot of mistakes early on and gets benched, and it's bad enough to the point where Bruce Arians is just going to shut him down, and they're going to have a lot to think about with him going into the offseason, deciding whether to give him a new contract or not. I think that he's not going to end up finishing the year at quarterback. But my bold prediction this year is that Christian McCaffrey, I think he gets 1,000 yards. Actually, I think he gets over 1,200 yards, both rushing and receiving, for the Carolina Panthers. This guy's a do-it-all kind of player, and I remember, I believe it was like 10 or 15 years ago when Steven Jackson for the St. Louis Rams at the time said that he thinks he could get 2,500 all-purpose yards with both rushing and receiving. He wasn't able to do that. I think that Christian McCaffrey has that potential and could possibly push that plateau. But I'm just going to say that he's going to get 1,200 of both. So he's going to get just short of that 2,500 plateau, but it wouldn't surprise me if he gets there.
Sure, that's a solid prediction. I think on the Jameis Winston one, it's almost 50-50 whether he finishes out the year or not at this point. Being benched for a large portion of last year in favor of Ryan Fitzpatrick is not a good look for him. New coach, new regime, probably short leash with him. They need to find out what they have. My surprise is that your division-winning Carolina Panthers actually finished the season under 500. I think that Christian McCaffrey is going to have a big year for sure, but I think that a lot of those other offensive pieces aren't going to come together. I don't think DJ Moore is going to necessarily emerge as a top receiver. I don't think Cam Newton is going to rebound after last year and become a better player. I think that they're going to lose a lot of divisional games, which is going to kind of send them on a little bit of a downward spiral. And then my bold prediction is that Julio Jones gets a touchdown week 1, unlike last year where he had that touchdown drought for a big portion of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you look at it with Julio Jones, he's kind of had a downward trend in touchdown receptions. Like, you can definitely count on him for giving you double-digit fantasy points, but typically it's not because he's getting a touchdown, just because he's getting a lot of yards.
Calvin Ridley was the touchdown guy last year, especially through the first half of the year, where he would sometimes get 2 or 3 in a game, and Julio Jones would get 0.
Yeah, so I do like that bold prediction. Then Carolina, yeah, with them, it's really hit or miss. If they're healthy, I think they're at that plateau of being one of the top teams in the NFC. But injuries have been an issue for this team over the last few years. Offensively, mainly Cam Newton. Defensively, you can make a case that it's been a lot of Kuechly. So I could possibly see that case. I do like that we're both in agreement on McCaffrey, but yeah, I think if they do fall under 500, it's going to be because of a key injury, either on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. We didn't even mention Greg Olson, who's kind of been a huge injury factor for them this last couple of years.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Let's move on then to. Do you want to go East?
Yeah, let's go with the East right now. So we'll do a quick summary of that as well. So this was an interesting division last year because no one really knew what was going to happen. The Redskins got off to a great start. It seemed like they were in position to win that division. Then the Alex Smith injury happened, and as a result, they fell back. We saw the Eagles and the Cowboys kind of battle for that division. End up seeing the Cowboys win that division off a late second half surge from Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, and a very good defense last year as well. We also saw the Eagles; they made the playoffs as well. Carson Wentz did get injured again in the regular season. Nick Foles stepped up, helped them get to the divisional round, and almost got them close to another NFC Championship game. And then the Giants, they had their struggles. Saquon Barkley played really well, but they're at that point now. They were in the rebuilding process. So, Ryan, who do you have winning the East this year?
Man, you're not going to agree with my picks and predictions on this one, but I'm going to go with the New York Giants winning the NFC East. And I think that out of all of the teams in this division, the Giants have the most dependable quarterback. Now, you may scoff at that notion. However, when Eli Manning actually has protection in front of him and isn't running for his life, he's still a solid quarterback. We haven't been able to see it for a few years because that offensive line has been so bad. They've had so many injuries. They've had so many distractions with Odell Beckham Jr. Well, now they're trying to shore up that offensive line. They have a really good running back. Odell Beckham Jr. is gone. They're going to find people to catch the ball for them. They still have Ingram there at tight end. He's a solid player. And I think that these other teams are going through some shaky times. Carson Wentz just got a big deal, but coming off an injury. You have Dak Prescott, who nobody really knows if he's the guy long term. So there's some question marks on these other teams. The Redskins are obviously a mess. So I'm going to say that the Giants win this division this year.
And I'm not going to lie, when I first heard you say that, I thought you were going to say, oh, this is my surprise and my bold. Because that is, picking the Giants is very bold. And with that, I don't think you mentioned it, but in this case, are you saying that Eli Manning plays the full season as starter, or is this one where Daniel Jones comes in?
No, I'm saying Eli Manning plays a full season. And I think this is kind of going to be like a farewell tour for Eli Manning where he plays his heart out, kind of like Brett Favre did for the Packers the last season that he was there with them, where he took them all the way to the NFC Championship game. I think it's going to be very similar, where this team kind of rallies around Eli, sensing that it's sort of a changing of the guard coming up in the next few seasons. And I think that this team is going to be good with Eli Manning starting all year.
Yeah, that team definitely has an interesting look. You look at some of the players. They did give away, obviously, Olivier Vernon, Odell Beckham Jr., but they did get some good players in return. Kevin Zeitler, Jabril Peppers, they signed Golden Tate. So if they can get those pieces to work together, sure, they have a chance. I'm not going to go with them, though. I think you have to go with the defending champs. I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. I think what we saw at the second half last year after the trade deadline, but they got Amari Cooper. That offense looked phenomenal, and that defense was great for them last year as well. I think that the pieces that they have right now of Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, Leighton Vander Bosch, those guys on defense, I think that they're in a very good position to take control of that division for a long time. Now, the Eagles, they're going to have an opportunity if Wentz stays healthy, but we're not. The reason why I'm not picking them is we don't know how he's going to do the full season. Coming off of a back injury, that's a very tough injury to come back from. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys. I think that they are the most mature and ready team, even though they're young, of all the teams of the division.
So you ready for my bold picks and surprises?
Yeah, what you got from me, Ryan?
All right, so surprise, Amari Cooper scores fewer touchdowns than he did last year. I think last year was sort of an aberration with him switching to the Cowboys and finding so much open space to catch the ball. I think he's going to be double teamed a lot in that defensive secondary this year and won't have quite the stellar season that he had when he first got to Dallas. And then my bold prediction is Saquon Barkley wins MVP. So this is part of why I think the Giants are going to win the division, is because Saquon Barkley has such a good dynamic season that he actually propels this team while winning MVP this season.
And now it's starting to make a little more sense with what you're going with, right?
Yep, the dots are all connecting. The puzzle pieces are starting to fit into place.
Yeah, definitely do like that. My surprise this year is that I'm not sure if you would even consider this, but I don't think the Eagles make the playoffs this year. I do like some of the moves they made. I do like them getting Jordan Howard. I think that could help there because their running back or field has been really shaky these last couple of years, even though they did trade for J.J. He's had injury issues, and then some of those guys that were projected to do well filling in did not. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. Like I said, with Carson Wentz there, no more Nick Foles as the backup. So what's really going to happen if Carson Wentz goes down? Because it's happened the last couple of years. They've had a really good backup to help them. So I think if it does happen, that they're going to find a lot more struggles with him out. So that's why I'm saying that my surprise would be them not making the playoffs. But my bold prediction has to do with one rookie in that division. That's Dwayne Haskins. I think that he ends up winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year. The reason why is because he's going to have the best opportunity to start right away. You look at that offense. Alex Smith, his career is still in jeopardy. He's even mentioned that he's got to learn to run as a quarterback again recently. So there's the question marks around that. Colt McCoy, not really your starting quarterback. Case Keenum has had certain experience these last couple of years, but I think that they're just gonna give the keys to Haskins, let him run the offense. They're not gonna make the playoffs. They're not really gonna be in contention, but he's gonna perform well enough to surprise a lot of people, and I think that's why he's gonna end up winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL.
That's interesting. I would go the other way on Dwayne Haskins, although I do agree with you on Carson Wentz being sort of a question mark with them, injuries and all of that stuff going on. That's going to be one of the probably more highly contested divisions. That, and I would think the North would be the ones to watch. Let's switch it over to the West, though. You want to start with your team that's going to win it?
Yeah, I'll start with my team, and we'll do a little recap of this division as well. Obviously, the Rams, they dominated the division last year, getting all the way to the Super Bowl. The Seahawks, they had their struggles at the beginning of the year, but still found their way into the playoffs as a wild card before losing to the Cowboys. The 49ers had a lot of hype going into the season. Then Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL, and then things kind of shifted downward for them later in the year. Remember, they also didn't have Jerick McKinnon the full season as he tore his ACL, so they kind of shifted running backs for the whole year. And then the other team in that division, the Cardinals, obviously they had the worst record. They end up getting Kyler Murray with the first pick this year. I'm going. It's a team. It's not the Rams, and it's not the other team that you would expect. I'm going to go with the 49ers. And the reason why is I like their young pieces that they have. Jimmy Garoppolo healthy, I think changes that team. They have a lot of very good running backs now on that team. McKinnon, if he's healthy to go. Tevin Coleman, they signed this offseason. Matt Breida played really well for them last year. They have some very good young receivers, especially a couple that they drafted this year. Greg Kittle becoming one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Their defense is solid. They're not a top, I wouldn't say necessarily a top 10, top 5 defense, but they're a solid enough defense to keep you in games where your offense is struggling. I think that the Rams are going to have a setback. There are a lot of question marks still about Todd Gurley. That doesn't make me confident in picking them, even though they're going to get a fully healthy Cooper Cup coming back. You look at the Seahawks, I'm not sure what they're really capable of. They signed Russell Wilson to that huge deal, but how is he going to play up to that deal? And then the Cardinals, I think they're still rebuilding a little bit, obviously with rookie coach and a rookie quarterback. So I'm going to go with the 49ers this year.
Yeah, that's not shocking to me at all. And I think that they put together a pretty good roster, and it's really going to be dependent on how good Jimmy G is and what his health situation is like, because the small sample size we got from Garoppolo has been solid so far. But coming back from that injury and having a larger sample size, will he actually be able to produce like he did when he first took over the starting role in San Francisco? Only time is going to tell with that. I agree with you that I think he's actually going to have a really good season. And I'm going to go with my bold prediction first, since you kind of brought it up, and that's going to be that Jimmy Garoppolo has the highest QBR in the division when the year is over. So I think he's going to beat out Goff and then also Russell Wilson for the highest QBR. My team that's going to win, I think, is still going to be the Los Angeles Rams. I think that they put together such a good team that losing the Super Bowl is not going to deter them from having a great season like it sometimes does with a lot of teams. I think Sean McVay is going to keep them focused. Jared Goff is going to continue to progress, even though it probably won't be a huge progression. And like you said, Cooper Kupp coming back. We don't necessarily know about Todd Gurley, but if he's good, he's always really good. So I think the Rams are still the team to beat. I'm going to go with my surprise, too. My surprise in this division is that Kyler Murray is going to start every single game for the Cardinals. No injuries, no times that he gets benched. Starts every game.
And I do like the picks that you make there. I think the bold prediction of Jimmy Garoppolo, if he's healthy, I do really think that's capable, especially with Kyle Shanahan kind of helping him lead the way there.
He's a true passing quarterback also. So,
yeah.
Russell Wilson's going to run. That's where he gets a lot of his yardage from. That's where he gets a lot of his fantasy points from. That's how he makes plays. Jimmy Garoppolo is more of a guy that likes to push the ball downfield.
Yeah. And I also like your pick about Kyler Murray, because the whole how is his body going to handle to the NFL is definitely something that I'm a little bit worried about. But if he's able to start 16 games, that'd definitely be impressive, no matter what he ends up doing this year. Looking at my picks, I'll do my surprise pick first, or do I want to do my bold prediction first? I'm going to do that one first, because I think this one's really going to shock you. My bold prediction, the Seattle Seahawks do not make the playoffs. And the reason why I am going with them here is I think there are some question marks on that team. We saw really good seasons last year, obviously from Russell Wilson. We saw some trying to remember their running back. It's crossing my mind. You know which one I'm talking about? Not Rashard Perry.
You mean Penny?
Not Rashard Penny. Sorry about that. Chris Carson. That's the guy. I'm not sure how he's gonna. I'm not sure how he's gonna bounce back this year. They still have a lot of question marks in the receiving game as well. Remember, Doug Baldwin, no longer a part of that team. So there are some question marks. They did draft DK Metcalf, which I think will be a big help for them. And you have some question marks on defense too. I just think that they're going to be in that position where they're going to be maybe 8-8, 7-9, but they're just not going to be good enough to get to the playoffs this year. And I think that's why it's bold, because when Russell Wilson's been in the league, they've been in the playoffs. And it's going to be very shocking to see him not make the playoffs this year. But my surprise this year is that I think that the Cardinals are going to be a lot better than people think. I think that they're going to win 6 games this year. And that seems like a very high number, but I think with Kyler Murray's playmaking ability, that they're going to be competing in that division right away. And you can question the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury all you want, but the guy got the quarterback that he wants to run his offense. He's an offensive-minded coach. You get a good defensive-minded defensive coordinator there, that team's going to put up some numbers. And even though there still are some question marks on who's going to be getting the majority of those catches, whether that's Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, Christian Kirk, other guys on that team, I think that they're going to turn some heads this year. I think they're going to win 6 games.
That is a high number. I'll give you that one. I have a couple thoughts here. First of all, the Seahawks are essentially the St. Louis Cardinals of the NFL. No matter how bad you think they're going to be or who they get rid of, they always find a way to be relevant when it's playoff time. And then there's so many teams in the NFC that it seems like it would be surprising to not get into the playoffs. So if you look at almost every division, it seems like there's three teams that should be playoff teams. Like you go to the North, there's the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings. You go to the South, there's the Falcons, the Panthers, and then the Saints. You go to the West, there's the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers. And only 6 of these teams are going to make it. And that's only in those 3 divisions. You have 9 that look possible. And then you bring in, 2 more, or 3 more potentially from the East. And then there's always one surprise team that's good. So this is going to be a hotly contested conference this year.
Yeah, as we had said it, this is really going to be tough to determine not just the division winners, but who's actually going to get in as a wild card. Just because there are so many more possibilities in the NFC than there is in the AFC, and there's going to be a lot of teams with. There's going to be some really good teams from last year that don't make the playoffs in the NFC this year, and honestly, I don't think it should be too surprising just because of how good I think the NFC got this offseason, how good that they're stacked going forward.
So that brings us to fantasy.
Yeah, so that does bring us to fantasy with our conclusion of the NFC preview. So we've been doing our rankings over the last few weeks. We've done the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, flexes, and defenses. So now we're getting to the point where this is probably the guy you're picking in your last round, and that is the kickers. Kickers are a big part of fantasy, even though they're more than likely your last pick overall. And there are some very good kickers in the league that you want, whether that's because their team scores a lot of touchdowns or because their team doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. There are very good quality kickers in the NFL and definitely do deserve some recognition in fantasy. Because of that, we get to see some cases where kickers are drafted like before the 10th round. So that's how key kickers are in fantasy. So Ryan, who do you have in your top 5 for kickers this year?
Yeah, weird situation for kickers because you generally want one on a team that scores a lot of points, but not necessarily a lot of touchdowns, which is kind of hard to locate a lot of times. And it's really a crapshoot on any given week how a kicker does. I've had games in fantasy where I needed 1 point, and I had a kicker left on Monday Night Football, and he got me none. And then there were games where I won because my kicker put up 24 points. So you never really know what you're going to get. This is a list that I compiled of kickers that I believe are actually very good kickers and will put up a good score line most weeks. So while you might not want to take them in your top 10 picks, they might be worth a pick earlier than the last round. So I'm going to go from 5 to 1. And there's not a whole lot to say about kickers where it's hard to analyze them because a lot of what they do is based on luck of how many field goal opportunities they get, how many extra points they get. But at number 5, I have Justin Tucker, for years regarded as the most accurate kicker with the most ability to kick distance field goals in the NFL. The only thing about him is that he plays for the Ravens with Lamar Jackson at the helm now, so it's unclear whether they're going to have a high output of points for him to capitalize on. But it's probably a safe bet that they're going to get in the red zone a reasonable amount and maybe not be able to punch it in, with Lamar Jackson's accuracy being sort of a question. So possible that Justin Tucker could be looking at kicking a lot of field goals this year. And then with my top 4, I have teams that score a lot of points and their kickers who are also fairly reliable. So number 4, Will Lutz of the Saints usually puts up big numbers with that Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara-led offense. Number 4, Stephen Gostkowski, obviously a very reliable kicker for the New England Patriots for years now. Always puts up good numbers even when kicking the outdoors. He's used to it. Harrison Butker has been super reliable for me the last 2 seasons now with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's quietly become a really solid kicker, not missing a lot of field goals. And with Patrick Mahomes still there, if Tyreek Hill comes back, a lot of points to be had in that offense. And then number 1, Greg Zuerlein, universally for the last couple of years renowned as the best kicker in the NFL in terms of the fantasy perspective, has put up big numbers in many weeks the past 2 years, and for a while was even a guy that experts said you should hold on to during the bye week instead of letting go of your kicker and not using an extra roster spot, having 2. So that's a very nice distinction for Greg Zerline to get that from fantasy football experts.
Yeah, and as you said, it's kind of tough to like give a description regarding why we pick these guys, especially since they're kickers. They only get you 1 to 3 points a game, but I do like the list you put. My list has most of the guys you have, just in a little bit of a different order. One guy that you also did not have. I'll go 5-1 as well. Number 5, I go with Steven Gostowski from the Patriots. They score enough points, but there are some times in games where he has struggled with consistency. So that could plateau him a little bit, but they're going to score enough points where he will be about a top 5 kicker this year. Number 4, I'm going to go Robbie Gould. And obviously right now he's in a little bit of a contract dispute with the San Francisco 49ers, whether he's going to get the franchise tag, what gets a long-term deal, even gets traded. But if he ends up playing there, or where he ends up playing, he's a very dependable kicker, and he has been, I think, better with the 49ers than he was with the Chicago Bears at one point. So if he plays with the 49ers, get him, start him. If he doesn't, still get him, still start him. I still think he's top 5 no matter where he goes. I like Greg Zerline at number 3. The Rams, they score a lot of points, and this guy has a great leg. This guy can kick from like 65 plus if you need him. So I think if you're looking for guys that can get you those long distance field goals, go with Greg Zerline. Number 2, I'm going to go with Harrison Butker, a guy that they got. I remember when they signed him, they picked him up mid-season because they had some kicking issues and they had a kicker injured. And this guy was lights out. This guy recently got a new contract. He's getting paid. Definitely a guy that's going to be helping out that young Kansas City team for quite some time. And then number 1, I'm going with the guy at number 5, Justin Tucker. This guy has been dominant since coming to the league, and I don't really think that there's anyone that's better than him. I think he's the best in the league at this point right now, and I think that he's going to be the best kicker in this league for probably the next 5 years or so.
I like the idea of people walking around with Butker jerseys.
Yeah, that's didn't really think about that until you mentioned it right there.
It's a good name to have on the back of a jersey.
Yeah, definitely. Other than that, I don't think there's really too much differential. Obviously, we both had different number 4s, so it'll be interesting to see which one that we didn't have on our list ends up being in there as a fantasy kicker. And kickers, there's going to be a case where a guy that you end up drafting, there's a good chance he might not even be your kicker for that team come week 1 based off of a lot of the things we've seen these last few years.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. You could go a little bit earlier in the rounds and get a kicker that you believe is going to be reliable. It seems like somewhat rare that kickers go from being extremely reliable to being extremely unreliable, except in the case of some people like Mason Crosby. I usually like to pick players that kick in either warm weather cities or dome cities. So Minnesota Viking kickers generally, Detroit Lion kickers generally, Denver Bronco kickers generally with a high altitude there. So there's certain strategies you can use when trying to get a kicker, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be a crapshoot whether they're good or not. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's definitely true, especially with the extra point being back to the 33 or a 33-yard kick now instead of what it used to be a 20-yard kick. So definitely a thing to look out for this year, especially those leagues. I do remember a couple years ago, the championship for the league that I ran came down to an extra point that was missed because ESPN settings had it set where missed extra points actually did not give you a negative point. And there was a missed kick, and that person won by a half point because that kick didn't get negated 1 point. So if you are a guy that is the owner of a fantasy or the commissioner of your league, make sure you deduct points for all misses. I mean, definitely something to look out for.
Penalize people for missing, commissioners.
Exactly. And Ryan, with that said, that does bring us to another conclusion of Touchdown Tuesdays. What final thoughts do you have for the listeners?
Thanks again for watching and supporting. You can catch us live most Tuesdays late at night at around 10 o'clock if you want to go on YouTube Live. Otherwise, you can catch us on iTunes, Google Play, and Spreaker as we continue to have our podcast discussing what's going on in the NFL offseason. You're not going to want to miss it. Also, check out our NBA basketball podcast, Run It Back, led by Eric and a variety of co-hosts. That's always a good one. Eric's very passionate about the NBA, and it's always good to listen to him rant about what's happening there.
Yeah, very good. He definitely does go off on certain cases in the NBA. Especially, I do remember when I was on, we had a pretty interesting conversation regarding the Toronto fans cheering KD's injury. So definitely a good one to check out. But again, I do want to thank everyone for listening to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesday. Again, we are the official football podcast of Bruce Sports. Ryan said before, check us out on Google Play, iTunes, Spreaker. Check us out on our social media platforms on Facebook and Twitter. If you haven't voted already, go check out our question of the week on both Facebook and Twitter and give us your votes. We do want to give a shout out to Ryan Leisenry from Michigan, who did actually give us his NFC preview. He said that the Bears, Falcons, Cowboys, and 49ers were going to win his division. So I do want to give him a quick shout out for that. We'll see if his picks are right. We'll see if ours are right. And then with that said, we look forward to bringing you the NFL news, XFL news, college football news, all the news in the NFL, all the news in the world of football next week. So good night, everyone. Take care. We'll talk to you next week.